The story begins in a dungeon. At that moment terrifying sounds came from here. The guy bleeding was incredibly angry at the old man who told him about this place. He couldn't understand how this could happen. Looking at the approaching monster, the guy knew one thing for sure: he cannot die such a death. At that moment a giant snake attacked him. His name is John Heon. He is 38 years old and it looks like he will die today. Looking at the monster, he wanted to understand at what moment everything went wrong. Perhaps it started 15 years ago. In 2025, tombs suddenly appeared all over the earth. People in horror tried to escape from the rays that began to appear directly from the sky. The appearance of the tombs was accompanied by a powerful earthquake, but in these tombs there were various things. So-called relics. It was all these relics that people found in the tombs that changed their world. Myths, legends, traditions, fairy tales, all of this has long had some kind of power. These things endowed their owner with all kinds of power, and gradually here and there rumors began to appear about people who changed their lives by acquiring the relic. Of course, in this case, all the people began hunting for relics. In fact, like our hero, even though he decided to do it late, at some point he finally got what he wanted and was able to take possession of a very powerful relic, archaeological relic. It gives the owner knowledge of all tombs and relics. It was a real jackpot because with the help of this relic he was able to put an end to his miserable life and with the help of new abilities start all over again. But as it turned out, he was a little late. A new order had already been firmly established in their world. People who captured most of these relics created a society where no one else could use them, but still having received recognition of his archaeological abilities, he was able to become an employee of a large corporation called TKBM. Director Quan Ton promised to help him. In any case, the work was hard and you often had to get your hands dirty. Smuggling, theft, espionage, and tomb robbing. He retrieved all the relics hidden in the depths. Of course, he was proud of what he was able to achieve as a tomb robber. After several years, the director received the status of the strongest man in the world, all thanks to John Heon. The more influential the director became, the more our hero was condemned, but even so he simply endured and worked on. But he could not imagine such a terrible end. This job was a trap prepared by Director Quan. He sent John and several other colleagues to a deadly place. Luckily, their abilities were good enough that they sensed the danger. What a freak Director Quan turned out to be, and again the action moves to the present. At that moment the monster attacked our hero, grabbing a stone from the ground. John threw it at this giant snake which ate all of our hero's subordinates. Does she really want to eat him now? He told her that she could try it, but then he would tear her to shreds. At that moment the monster attacked our hero, but a certain voice told the guy to shut up. The guy, perplexed, asked what kind of voice this was and who was speaking. The monster also did not expect this and began to look around in bewilderment. The voice asked if John Heon could really hear him, to which the guy replied that he had been hearing him for a couple of days. Our hero began to shout out that although he did not know who or what was talking to him, the best thing to do would be to remove this snake and let him go from here. The voice pointed the guy to his feet and asked, does he really think he can live in such a body with these two stubs? In any case, he won't last long. The guy continued to look at the floor, and the voice added that these were his last minutes of life. At this moment the snake attacked again, and the stranger continued to taunt our hero, telling him that having such strong abilities he could not enter the new era. Bleeding John asked in bewilderment what the voice even knew about him. Once again the guy started screaming, saying with all his might that he would definitely find and finish that old man. The voice began to laugh and say that in such and such a state he would definitely not have enough abilities. A moment later a very bright light appeared in the air. As it turned out, it was the bird that spoke to our hero. She said she would give him a chance to be the best at something for once. After a moment Jan's eyes began to open. He analyzed the bird's words and tried to understand what it meant to be the best. And anyway, what was it? Was it really a divine relic that looked like a crow? At that moment the guy looked down and noticed something incredible. He immediately jumped up in bewilderment. His legs, which had previously been eaten, were back in place. One realized that his legs were fine, just like his other wounds. What happened then? Our hero turned around and realized that he was in a crowded place and all the people were looking at him. As it turned out, the guy ended up in the police station. But what actually happened? Some guy at that moment turned to our hero and asked was he just talking to himself. He recalled that he asked him for personal information and it was better to finish this quickly. Jan apologized after a few seconds of silence and sat down in his chair. The guy immediately asked the name of our hero. It was at this moment that one again began to think about that crow and what happened in that place. Maybe it was a hallucination. Meanwhile, the police station officer was losing his temper because the guy again did not listen to him. The police, who by this time were already tired of the shouting at the station, asked to finish their business as soon as possible. At this moment one of them casually mentioned that the year is 2025. Our hero turned around in bewilderment. Didn't he hear? He looked at the date and time sign and was horrified. It actually said it was 2025 on January 1st. Juan then turned his head and looked at the guy. It turned out to be familiar to him. Apparently now is the time when that guy attacked our hero and everything reached the police. Our hero was incredibly terrified. Apparently all this is true. He found himself in 2025 again. Then he realized that if it was January, their world was still normal, that is, the actions take place before the relics appeared. This is quite a convenient case because the divine relics still lie untouched in their tombs. This only means that Jan will be able to get all these relics this time. He still has the memories and knowledge, so he can take them as a basis from the very beginning and clean out the tombs. Jan liked the idea. He laughed and thought, what will happen in this case over time after the world was consumed by the power of relics? Our hero believed that nothing could surprise him, but today is full of surprises. First of all, he would never have thought that there was a tomb that would make even such an experienced robber as Jan tremble with fear. Secondly, his last mission turned out to be a trap prepared by that scoundrel Quant Jun, and finally right before his death he suddenly returned 15 years ago. Although John didn't understand how this was possible, this was definitely the greatest chance to get the relics before anyone else. At that moment the guy's mother approached our hero and in bewilderment began asking if he was listening to her. Is this all a joke to him? How dare he hit her child, a high school graduate? What if it left him crippled for life? She started talking about how John had to pay compensation. Our hero was incredibly infuriated by this woman. Of course, you first need to deal with it. Although all this happened 15 years ago, he remembers everything. Clearly this schoolboy was looking for a fight himself. He wouldn't let go, so we had to teach him some manners. Everything was planned because the guy literally immediately collapsed on the floor. All he could do was apologize and beg to reduce the amount of compensation. Unfortunately, Jan didn't have any money for them right now, just like they didn't have any income. How then can you get all the relics? Our hero tried to find another way out because what was happening was most likely fiction. Meanwhile, the woman was losing her temper because the guy was ignoring her. At that moment she began to say that if someone contacts him, then he needs to listen immediately. After that she swung her hand. To our hero's surprise, he was able to block her blow. Apparently his fighting skills have improved as he retained all the accumulated experience and knowledge over the past 15 years. Of course it was to his advantage. He asked the woman to calm down and not do anything stupid. The guy screamed and said that her son was the first to get into a fight, and besides, had she ever thought how funny she looked now? At that moment her son, the same schoolboy, jumped up and said that he wanted to be generous and let him go in an amicable way, but Jan was not at a loss and with a slight movement knocked the guy to the ground. Our hero felt that his body was definitely lighter than before. Apparently this is due to the fact that he has not yet received any side effects from the relics. The police immediately came running to the fight, asking the guys in bewilderment what they were trying to achieve by starting a fight at the police station. Our hero told the men that he would not be able to pay compensation, so they could put him behind bars. The woman, perplexed, asked what he was doing. Is it really better to have a criminal record than to pay them money? He's making a big mistake. John of course understood that a criminal record would lose its meaning when the relics appear. The world will be mired in chaos and lawlessness. After some time the guy sat in the cell and was immersed in his thoughts. It was necessary to quickly find means to search for his old relic. While the guy was thinking what to do, unexpectedly he noticed a strange inscription in front of him. He began to hit himself on the head, thinking that his vision was beginning to fail him. Only this didn't help. The inscriptions appeared again, and our hero decided that a relic was definitely involved. That Raven is 100% involved in this. Jan started screaming and looking around. He asked that the Raven show itself again and not quietly watch him. At this moment even more inscriptions and all kinds of information appeared in front of our hero. The window showed the guy the basic skills of a tomb raider. The open skill allowed him to observe the area within a 1m radius. Juan was even more unhappy about this. Does this damn Raven really think that his life is just some kind of game? At this moment a new window appeared which said that you need to open 4 basic skills of the Tomb Raider. Apparently now there will be more tasks. Also unexpectedly a policeman turned to the guy and asked in bewilderment why he was so noisy. With these words the guy realized that only he could see all these tables and inscriptions. Then our hero realized that he could see in detail everything within a radius of 1 meter. This skill is no different from what the archaeological relic gave him. Could it be that all his past skills are now inside this mode? If only one of the 4 is open, does that mean he can open more? Jan realized that if all his skills were like this, then there was no point in going after the archaeological relic. Of course, all this is very convenient, but what is the Raven Up to relics usually don't help people just like that. At this moment our hero was called out by a stranger who was greeting Jan. After some time they were on the street. The guys laughed and Jan's acquaintance told him that that schoolboy was an inveterate criminal. He told our hero that he is not the only one who has been to prison. In any case he will take care of this incident. The guy thanked him for this. This is Detective Kim Jong-woo. This is the older brother who sheltered our hero when he was an orphan. He treats him like his own. The guy smiled looking at his brother. He had never noticed before how young he looked 15 years ago. Our hero called Kim Jong-woo and said that he wanted to ask something. One asked his brother if there had been any reports of paranormal activity or related to supernatural forces. Kim Jong-woo said in bewilderment that if you think about it like that, then his wife definitely has supernatural powers, because then how does she find his stash of money? A moment later the brother asked our hero to go home and rest. The guy understood that tombs would soon appear, but the owners of the Re had still not been found. In other words, it's time to act because he can already use his skills, and then there is a high probability of realizing all his plans. But unfortunately the problem was that he had no money. First the best relics appeared in Europe or America. Our hero immediately began to think about how he could pay for the flight, but at that moment some gang of hooligans called him, who were interested in why he was walking around here with nothing to do. Previously these guys were scary for Jan, but now they are a great source of income. At this moment Park Kyung-tae asked our hero why he doesn't respect them. In their opinion he should have immediately bowed when he saw them. This guy used to be a street punk and now works as an art dealer. Together with his sister, he opened an art gallery. In fact they are good for nothing. Jan worked part-time for them because he urgently needed money to attend high school. He didn't plan to stay long, but they weren't going to let him go. It wasn't that he was useless, in fact on the contrary, he worked like everyone else and maybe surpassed others in some ways. But was he respected? There was not a drop of respect in his direction. These people treated him like a dog, keeping him on a short leash and threatening to reduce his salary. A guy with blonde hair walked up to John and asked why he wasn't answering. Our hero decided not to hesitate in action and therefore immediately hit the freak with all her might. A bunch of hooligans looked at the guy falling in bewilderment and were perplexed by this. Jan looked at these idiots and asked them to tell their boss that he was no longer working for her. Park Kyung-tae immediately began to threaten the guy, saying that he was doing something stupid. Our hero smiled and told them that it would be better to give his salary and severance pay, and the sooner the better. Park Kyung-tae just laughed in response to this and immediately attacked the guy with his fists. He was too slow for Jan, so while he was swinging our hero landed a quick and accurate blow to the face. After that he grabbed the freak by the head and hit him with his knee with all his might. All Park Kyung-tae's friends were horrified by what happened to Jan, because before he was not so fast, and besides he did not know how to fight. The young master told them to shut up and attack the guy instead. This is what they decided to do. These John clowns were not for anything, so he immediately knocked one out with his fist and kicked the other in the head. A moment later the two of them were lying on the ground and Park Kyae and his friend were confused. Our hero just liked it. The result of his 15 years of combat experience was certainly pleasing. Then the guy asked the trash if they were all there. Park Kyang-der at that moment took out his knife and said that they accepted him and raised him as their own, and this is all gratitude. The guy at that moment asked Park KY to be careful with the knife because Jan already had a buyer. The guy didn't care and said he didn't care looking at the knife. Our hero thought apparently it was a relic, but where did he get it from? In any case the guy decided that this was not surprising because most of the relics attract the attention of people creating tombs and some are hidden among people. Our hero smiled and decided that this was a great meeting because soon this knife would belong to him. Park Kyung-tae went on the attack. At that moment he swung his knife, but Jan easily dodged and moved aside. A moment later the guy's hand wrapped around Park Kyung-tae's hand and the knife. Our hero was surprised that such a freak had the courage to point a knife at him. The guy without another word snatched the knife from Park Kyung-tae's hand and said that he would take good care of it. Then he turned around and told me to watch carefully and learn how to use it correctly. This relic allows you to look at a person from the inside, thereby you can see all the organs. The guys ran up to our hero and together tried to grab him, but everything was even. He disappeared. To their surprise, a moment later the guy appeared again, but this was horror for them because he cut both his arms and legs. Then looking at the knife, Jan decided that this knife seemed to have extra strength, which was quite convenient. Meanwhile all the hooligans were screaming and whining. Our hero asked them to shut up because he slightly offended them, but if they refused to give the money things could get worse. The guy immediately flew into a rage and ordered them to give him all their money if they didn't want to die in this alley. Of course they couldn't say anything else because the lives of these pathetic monsters are important to them, so they gave everything they had. The action moves to the city to one of the offices. Meanwhile, Park Kyung-tae's sister Park Kyungju was on the phone and was in disbelief that Jan had kicked all their asses and taken the money. She asked her brother if he really thought this was a normal excuse. The guy told his sister that he also had no idea how this happened. This slug Jan just yesterday did not know the basics of combat, but he became completely different. Even his look changed. The girl sighed heavily and then asked how much money the guy took from them. Park Kyung-tae scratched his head and said that he took all their money and the product sample they were going to use in the deal. Besides, as it turned out, he didn't take everything. Coming back when Yuan was counting all the money, he said that this was not enough and that he needed more. The guys told him that this was all. To which our hero looked at Park Kyung-tae in bewilderment. The guy asked what would happen if he found something else, in which case they would be out of luck. With half-hearted grief, one of the guys still handed over the Buddha statue, which our hero was happy about. Park Kyung-tae asked to take anything but not her. John smiled and guessed from the phrase that just came out of Park Kyung's mouth that this thing was valuable. In this case, it is confiscated. Our hero silently began to leave and Park Kyung-tae, almost with tears in his eyes, shouted at him and asked him to stop. Buddha was very important to him. After listening to her brother's story, Park Kyung seemed to go crazy and screaming. She ordered these idiots to return the figurine. The action moves to the pawn shop. It was here that Jan came in the morning and offered the figurine. The seller said that it wouldn't even cost 50,000 won, so it would be better to put it at home. The guy asked in bewilderment how this could be, to which the man told him that he understood at first sight that no one would buy it. At this moment, our hero thought it was strange that Park Kyung-tae acted as if she was worth millions, but in reality she was just useless trash. A moment later, the guy was walking down the street. In fact, he also thought that this statue was quite valuable. Was his assessment wrong given that he doesn't have his old heirlooms? Suddenly an incomprehensible energy began to emanate from the figurine, and within a second a window with inscriptions appeared in front of the guy. There was a suspicious entity hidden inside the Buddha. That's it. Our hero felt that something was wrong with her and that freak would not have held on to her with all his might. Taking his knife, a satisfied Jan decided to check what was inside. Cutting the figurine to the ground, a certain flask with a strange liquid inside fell. Taking the flask in his hands, the guy immediately realized that it was a liquid drug, just a couple of drops per cigarette, and you are ready to smoke. Our hero immediately began to turn around so that unnecessary eyes would not see this, because in fact this is quite an expensive thing, and those freaks also sell drugs. Looking at the cone, Jan thought and guessed that they must have hundreds of exhibits, meaning that they could all be filled with the same thing. The guy immediately took out his phone and called John Woo-hong. He said hello and asked what the reward would be for denunciation of smuggling. Meanwhile, Park Kyungju was on the phone with the president and told him that his order was not ready yet, and also that it would be better to lie low. The girl said that they were most likely being watched now. And at that moment a real nightmare was happening on the other side of the speaker, because the speaker was bursting with screams. Park Kyungju could only apologize once again. Then after listening to all the screams, she said that she would soon contact him as soon as the challenge ended. The kind and sweet girl turned into an angry and perplexed one. She was shocked and wondered why she would pocket all the money. At that moment the sounds of a door opening sounded behind her. As soon as she turned and saw her brother, she asked where they had been and if they had returned the Buddha. Park Kyungju looked at his sister with a sad look and said that they were completely trapped. The girl was certainly not happy with these words, and so she in bewilderment asked her brother what was happening. At this point Kim Jan-woo said that they were informed about the illegal distribution of drugs. Park Kyungju said that they sell works of art here and nothing more. The guy picked up the zip bag that contained that same flask and asked why criminals always cover up when they are caught red-handed. Kim Jun-woo also said that they know and more. He asked if it was true that they kept all the exhibits in their warehouse. The girl's face changed with every second. Park Kyungju was definitely shocked that they knew about the warehouse in Gyeonggi. Anyway, each warehouse has its own access code. The girl came up and told the guy that she didn't understand what he was talking about unless they have stronger evidence. It is better not to make false accusations against innocent people. Park Kung looked into Kwant Jun's eyes and said that even though he is a police officer, that does not give him the right to interfere in other people's business. At that moment, the guy picked up the radio from which the investigators were just saying that they checked more than 600 exhibits and drugs were found in each of them. Park Kyungju was immediately handcuffed, but she only asked in bewilderment how they opened the storage room. Each one has its own password. The guy smiled and said that everything is true, but they have their own methods, and it's good that someone from the inside is cooperating with them. At that time, one of the police officers turned to our hero and said that the premises were closed. The guy was a little surprised, but in any case he opened it without any problems. The men were surprised by this act. Jan turned to them and said that he just had a good memory. He really has a phenomenal memory. One might say this is his only talent. It was because of him that Park Kongju used him later. At first it was difficult to work since the warehouses have different passwords, but it was really annoying, so he just remembered them. Of course he never thought that his knowledge would ever be useful. The main thing is that everything went according to plan. He understood that soon he would receive a reward and he would finally have funds, then he can start hunting for relics. Meanwhile, police officers checked the exhibits and found drugs in literally everyone. They were surprised at the self-confidence of those people. The men smiled and said that John did the right thing, to which our hero replied that he was glad to help in the investigation, and then asked them for a favor. At this time the police were taking Park Kongju away, and Kwon Jun was calling his brother. He asked in surprise why he called. Did he really want to talk to him? Then the guy asked him a question with a request. The guy of course complied with his brother's request and immediately called Park Kongju and asked him to stop. He said that his assistant wanted to convey something, and after a moment he put the phone to her ear. Jan told the woman that they should have treated him better. He continued to say that they had to pay the entire salary when he worked. After a while the girl realized whose voice this was and in bewilderment asked if it was all because of him. One laughed and told her that she should have changed her passwords more often, like once every 6 months or something like that. The guy wished them to enjoy their stay in prison, and a moment later the girl was taken to the car. As she left she screamed that she would definitely kill him. Already at night our hero returned home and laughed at this whole situation. It was definitely fun. At that moment the guy received a message from his brother on his phone in which he said that he was proud of him and that he would soon receive his reward, but it was better not to spend it all at once. The guy smiled and said that he would spend it wisely. He was glad that Kim Gonwa cared so much about him. In any case he won't have to worry anymore, because as soon as he receives his starting capital, he can start searching for tombs. Of course in this case he will find the tombs first, then that freak Kwon Jun. As soon as the guy approached the place from which he had always seen his house, he was a little shocked because he simply wasn't at home. A huge tomb arose on the site of their area, and it definitely appeared here for a reason. The people who lived in the area were terrified and desperate. They didn't understand what was happening. They were arguing with each other and asking each other to stop yelling. Some of them ran up to the soldiers and asked what was happening, but they themselves had no idea. Jan understood the state of all these people, but this will happen more and more often until the world finally plunges into chaos. The guy even remembered how it happened last time, and all the situations were reported to him over the phone, because that day, as usual, he was working for that bastard Park. The day he returned home, and fortunately for himself he did not see anything unusual, and this only means that someone cleverly cleared the tomb in a few hours. Apparently this someone was now among all these people, and this time he cannot let him get to the relics. Suddenly the guy heard a familiar voice behind him. One of the people asked not to shoot. As it turned out, it was our hero's neighbor Kim Dong-hun. Meanwhile, the soldier was yelling and telling everyone to shut up. Everyone needs to stop panicking and just stay where they are. Our hero decided not to stand on ceremony and not tolerate such an attitude towards ordinary people, so he knocked him out. The guy's neighbor was surprised by what he saw, and John asked the soldier if he was too crazy to be waving his gun around here. After that the guy smiled and told his neighbor that they had not seen each other for quite a long time. He's still the same good-natured big guy. As soon as the soldier stood up, Jan asked if he had come to his senses. The guy apologized and said that he didn't know what hit him. Our hero said that this was not important and therefore immediately asked what was happening here and why there were so many soldiers here. The guy was speechless, having not heard an answer. John continued to ask questions. He asked if they tried to get into that tomb. The soldier said that he had no right to answer this. Our hero decided that it was clear that they tried. In this case the main thing now is to identify the government dogs. The guy approached the soldier again and said that this was their house and they wanted to know why a crowd of soldiers with guns was hanging around here. He looked at him and added that he most likely should know what would happen to him if John decided to report to his superiors what he was doing here. Until the guy pacified him, it was better to help each other to avoid problems, so it's better to tell it like it is. The guy resigned himself and said that their task was to destroy the object first, removing a certain thing inside it. He assured that no one or anything would be harmed. John understood that they had no idea what they were dealing with. At that moment the soldier added that there were several other scientists with them who knew what was what. As soon as our hero heard about the scientists, he immediately began to grasp the idea. The guy immediately thanked the soldier for his honesty. He immediately turned around and said that they So he wished them luck. The guy was flattered by this and said that they would definitely cope. After the conversation, Kim Dong-hun approached his neighbor and asked if he had achieved anything, to which our hero said that he had not learned much. All that remains is to wait. After that, the guy turned around again and left. Kim Dong-hun, of course, was shocked by what was happening and also could not help but notice that the guy was strange. Today the action moves a little closer to the main object, which the men in black grabbed. CIA agent Linda Walker asked by phone to check the information again because the Korean government should already know about the tombs. The caller on the other side assured the girl that they knew nothing. It was quite strange for her because there were a lot of military people here. The caller continued to say that everything was under control and that they were not acting on their instructions, and he also asked not to mention tombs in their conversations. All this is classified. Then he asked her to report the situation. Linda Walker said that everything is in order here. The dynamite has been successfully planted, which means they will soon be ready to enter the facility. The voice said that was very good and reminded them to follow the protocol. They must not miss anything because every relic must be delivered intact. At that moment, Abe Koshi from the archaeological unit approached the girl and, looking at the perplexed girl, said that they were definitely not the only ones to reap the benefits of one world. He then added that they should rather be surprised that they arrived earlier than they did. He hoped that Linda had a good flight because it was a long way. The girl said that unlike them, they extract relics for scientific purposes and make them the property of the whole world. Abe Koshi laughed and asked if she believed in her words. They won't let their scientists get anywhere near the relics. Then why this circus? They are either blind or trying to make fools of them. It's better to stop this idle chatter and finally go and take their artifact. Our hero, looking at the quarrels of these two, assumed that these guys were in charge here. He also suggested that they were representatives of the CIA and Japan, despite the fact that tombs had already begun to appear around the world. Their nature was initially unclear to the public, so when all this started, only a few of the most advanced countries were actually competing for the spoils. The USA and Japan were of course among them. The governments of such countries formed a special team to conduct excavations and extracted artifacts all over the world. Our hero was sure that these freaks would not get anything this time because the relic would be his. Look at their quarrel. John decided that this was very good for him because he could take advantage of their idleness in this case. The main thing is that the tomb is not blown up. While he is inside turning around, he saw the glyphs. She also loves relics as before because they, like living beings, crave acquaintances and attention. Those who can read the glyphs will easily find the information they need for a safe adventure in the ruins. Information about traps, passages, and secrets of the tomb. The guy knew that most people of course could not read them, but he was not the majority, and besides, he had found the entrance. At this moment, windows appeared in front of the guy as before, which indicated that he had unlocked a new title, skills and abilities. The new skill was Young Linguist. It provides understanding and learning of existing languages, and hidden glyph deciphering skills are also available. Jan decided that this is a good skill, but once again it's time for the windows to disappear because he can't see anything. After some time, the action moves to a flowing river and a bridge. There was a strange glow on one of the columns. Our hero suggested that this is the same place, so there is no need to hesitate. He immediately grabbed his knife and swung it. He was incredibly excited that the time had come to become a tomb raider. An incredible amount of energy immediately flew out of the column and soared into the sky.